On this AVNation special, we look at control and automation as it moves to the cloud, moves to the network. How do we get there? What data can we grab from it? And how do we get trained on how to do this? All that and more next on this AVNation special.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is an AVNation special, Control in the Cloud. This is an AVNation special. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. Today we're going to talk about programming and control and automation and its move to the cloud. One of my favorite quotes, and it's a snarky one, and I'm certain you've seen it on a t-shirt somewhere or a poster. There is no cloud. It's just somebody else's computer. Well, that's sort of true. But as the network becomes more and more prevalent in the AV industry and in the AV network and the architecture of what you're putting in, a lot of folks are moving to cloud-based computing, cloud-based programming, and automation. To talk about this and a couple other things, actually. First and foremost, buddy and pal, his name is Clint Hoffman. He is from Kramer. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Thank you, Tim.
Also with us is one half of my dynamic duo when I get stuck programming. His name is Steve Greenblatt. He is the chief muckety-muck over at Control Concepts and the host of our State of Control show. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
See, he's just modest and mild-mannered, but I'm not kidding you. I have called that man bawling on a Saturday afternoon because I didn't know what the frick I was doing. Also with us is Brian Morris. He is also from Kramer. How are you, sir?
Doing good, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we're going to start with this. A couple things here. I want to start, Clint, I'll start with you because you're one half of the manufacturers here, and we'll go with Steve and Brian. But when it comes to control in general, where are we at in the AV industry? And the reason I ask that is because Kramer's getting into control. Some of the folks who started out as in control are moving on to other things. It maybe feels like the last couple of years there hasn't been a whole lot of emphasis on this aspect of stuff that we still do, right? On a day in and day out basis. And integrators, this is, a good portion of what they integrate is they make all these disparate systems talk together. Where are we at when it comes to control in the AV industry?
Well, from my perspective, where we're at is that we've got a couple of solutions that have been out there for a very long time, since the late 80s, early 90s, 30 plus years, that are very high functioning, have been around a long time, been people's go-to solutions. They do require programming and, an understanding of code and going to a school for a couple of weeks. But there's people who make a very good living at using those tools. But we're also at this point where there's this AV-IT convergence that's finally happening after being bantered about for 15 years. And we're literally, integrators, dealers are talking to and selling to IT people more so every single day, if not entirely nowadays. And now you see all these other people coming out with control solutions, ourselves included, Kramer. But there seems to be a new one announced every single day. Some just live on servers. Some, claim to be cloud-based. Some, they're all out there. And at the end of the day, you can't out-volume up somebody, okay? So control is control. Okay. But what you can do is you can figure out a different way to deliver the experience. And you can also maybe do something like provide data, since you're selling to IT people. And if you can provide data, then you're giving them their lifeblood. And so if you come, what we've done, we came up with a control solution that, we came up with a data analytics engine that, by the way, is a control solution.
All right, Steve, same kind of question. Not for nothing, Control Concepts is an independent programmer, so they program several different platforms. From your standpoint, and you've been doing it for a couple of years now, a couple decades.
Sure.
Where do we sit here today when it comes to control and automation?
A couple of different ways we can answer this question. I think one way is that we're looking at providing more simplistic solutions and solutions that are easier for users and that users are more comfortable and accustomed to. Users want to eliminate some of the magic that has gone into control in the past, and they really want to be able to understand what they're getting, and be able to have something that they're more accustomed to. And of course the model that we typically lean toward or point to as the basis for that is the iPhone or the iPad, and that's always been a big motivating factor. And then with that, we've also started to hit a crossroads with how do we to get control to happen. And as Clint alluded to, in the past, programming was the only way of doing it, and programming was a very more of an art. It required training, and it required understanding and knowing the technical ins and outs of what it takes to actually make things happen. And that still is a viable solution, but many manufacturers now have introduced alternatives to that, and that being more of the configured approach, and that's something that is also a viable solution, and it just needs to be clarified as to what are the use cases of each, and who are the people that are involved in the projects. How do they best use these tools to be able to accomplish things? And when it comes down to it, what we're seeing is a lot of pressure to turn around projects quicker and faster and easier. And I think that's why these tools have been created, and it also opens the doors for more opportunities. Lastly, we're also looking at the idea that there's standardized programming languages that have now been introduced and also been provided as tools to be able to accomplish control. So what used to be a very niche industry and a very niche talent and art has now become a lot broader and a lot more mainstream, and there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? The introduction of the mainstream programming languages?
Well, for me, I think it's a fantastic thing. Now you're talking about being able to open the door so that you can, both be speaking the language of regular people that, that understand that you're working in JavaScript and HTML and C#. So it's no longer some proprietary language that people are afraid of. I think that's going to get a lot more penetration with clients. Plus, it also opens a door to a lot more tools and a lot more capabilities, and the resources available to mainstream programming languages far outweigh what are available to the proprietary languages. So, it's a combination of using all three of these different approaches to accomplish what you're looking for, depending on the use case.
I love the fact that you referred to people who speak Java as regular people. So
I talk to them every day. So what can I say?
My Java folks, but yeah, very interesting group of people. All right, Brian, Steve mentioned eliminating the magic of what happens here, and one of the things that we've talked about here, and we've talked about several other places, and people have been writing about for a couple of years, is this move to IT. Is that what it's going to take to make this a little bit more IT friendly? This idea that you've got, control. You have these. Let's be honest. Regardless of whether it's 232 or it's IP, you've got serial commands floating around on folks' networks, and you've got open ports. And the reason that they're open is so we can talk to different devices. What is it going to take to make this whole idea of control and automation a little bit more IT friendly?
I think there's two sides of it. One is using things that are more standardized across a network, right? Use communication parameters that aren't too chatty. Make sure that, we don't have to have any ports that are typically blocked open to have an IP-based control system infrastructure, things like that. Make it a lot less scary to the IT managers who have to go out and, allow that on their network. But then the other thing is also make the platform friendly to these IT guys that are out there that we're all selling to now, that have services embedded, like embedded analytics and things that have that available at the IT level so they can see exactly how their systems are being used. They can realize their return on investment and go back to the CFO and say, hey, we spent $100,000 across these couple rooms. We already got our money back by knowing, hey, this is how the rooms are being used. This is how we can get better utilization over time. And I think that, it all stems from the way that IT managers work in their everyday. And that's kind of not where control has been in the past several years.
All right. Clint, both you and Brian have mentioned the whole data and analytic part here. Is that kind of where you guys went and why you went? Did you go there first? Because you mentioned the fact that, hey, we have a data analytic tool, and by the way, it does control. Was that the idea, and going after the IT managers and going after the folks and saying, hey, here's this information that you've been asking for anyway, and oh yeah, by the way, we can also control your systems with it.
Absolutely. When we sat down and thought about, hey, we'd like to have a control offering, that was the single first overriding decision that was made. We're going to actually build a data analytics engine, because what happens when you're doing control is you're actually getting all the feedback from every single thing that's happening. So if we collect every single thing that's happening organically and make it immediately available to the user in a format that they can understand, then we're providing the service of the future, which is, I think the future is managed services. It's providing data. So we came to that conclusion and then said, okay, well, that's what we're going to do. And then we'll build a control solution using modern tools over top of that.
Steve, when you're talking to your clients, and granted, your clients are primarily other integrators or higher education folks who are hiring you guys to come in and program systems, what is the feedback you're getting? What is it that they're asking for? When it comes to a complete solution, when I turn on my system, this is what I want to see from the front end and the back end.
Excuse me. It's ease of operation, simplicity, and more intelligent systems. I think that's the direction that things are headed. We have to start looking at leveraging the IoT concept and being able to tie in different services that they're used to using independently to create one unified experience. And I think that's really what the push is. I don't necessarily say that we're there yet, but that's the direction that we need to be heading in. And we have to switch gears from just providing control to providing automation. And I think that's a big concept to start looking at. Like Clint says, data has a lot of value, and data is important for us to be able to collect, but also be able to process and present in a way that it can be useful. And I think that for a while, in many of the platforms, we've been collecting data and we've been doing monitoring of systems, but I don't necessarily know that we've been hitting the mark in terms of presenting clients with the information that they need that's useful to them. And then that's going to vary from client to client. And I was just recently at an event where they were talking about the value of having a data person on your team to be able to help take a look at the different criteria and make the data make sense. So we're not just talking about the use of a device in a room or the lamp hours and the room occupancy, but we're looking at who is in the room and what is it that they particularly use, and is there a preference of a certain demographic of person using a particular room because they like certain technology. So that's, and again, I'm not saying that that's what we're doing today, but these are some things that we should be thinking about.
All right, Brian, hard question for you. How do we do that? How do we give them, those granular pieces of information that, not just, the rooms they're using, but also the technology they're using in those rooms?
Well, I think step number one is make it a whole lot easier to deploy a system that can take that information, right? You look at the landscape of things today, you have to sit there and program for days to gather that information and hope you have all the right information up front. Because, things like users coming into a room, that's such a dynamic thing that could change every single day. You have a new hire, that they have a new badge ID, or, things like that you have to reference, that you have to be able to know that beforehand in order to program it and get it in the system today. Where if we can just do that up front and just have things, I don't want to get into drivers and things like that, but have the system architected to be able to take everything. It's easier to run a report if you have that information there. It's impossible to run a report if that information was never even pulled by the system. So I think that's step number one, is being able to get that there for people or a piece of software to analyze and run reports. And I think, like Steve said, I don't think anybody is quite to the point where we have the reports to provide to a customer to say, this is exactly the information you want. That's something that's going to evolve over time. But step number one is get away from the mystery of this whole thing and how, somebody that has a PhD needs to go and configure a system just to gather the information that's available to it.
Steve, Brian mentioned the driver part, and I want to get into this, but you also mentioned the IoT concept and making this a little bit more an aware system, right? A little bit more smarter system. How do we get there when it comes to regardless of whose solution we're using, whether it's Kramer's or somebody else's? Is it, like Brian said, you've got days worth of programming, or folks like you guys can, and other programmers can create these modules, create drivers to, you do it once and you spend an awful lot of time doing it. I mean, that's one of the parts of what control concepts does. And then once you do it, then you train your less experienced programmers. These are the modules you use to get X, Y, and Z worth of data.
So it's kind of twofold there. One, as far as the IoT is concerned, I think is developing a good model, coming up with the what are the guidelines and best practices for creating an IoT solution, and I think within that you need to be able to have a little bit of customization for the user and give them the ability to refine it to work best for them. Because I'm a big believer that automation can't be forced on somebody. So not everybody is best suited for a particular automation, even if it sounds really cool.
Well, and real quickly on that, it depends on the type of automation, because your version of automation and your idea of automation is not my idea of automation. So that goes back to something we've talked about for years, and that's a conversation with the actual client and the people using the system.
And it has to be a cultural fit. That's been my story all along. And we've had certain situations where we've walked in and said, we can make this really cool, where you're walking in the room and it's sensing you and starting your meeting. Or if somebody doesn't show up for a meeting, something gets canceled. And they said, by no means do something like that, because that does not work for us.
No.
So it really is something that, as you mentioned, you need to understand your client, and you need to kind of give them options and tell them this has worked before, and really model it out perhaps. But you have to start with something, to your point. And when it comes to drivers and stuff, we've actually been talking about this internally, is that there's one thing to control a device and use a driver and get feedback, but then there's another thing to be able to really pull the information out of it that you might need, that isn't necessarily the same that you would use to have control and automation, but more so to be able to do monitoring. There are different criteria and different aspects of the API that you're going to tap into than you would to just do your everyday control. So these modules almost need to have kind of a souped up version, if you will, or an enhanced module that gives you the analytics that you might be looking for on a device by device basis.
That's actually a really good idea. Clint, you guys have something?
Steve, that's actually a great point. If you don't mind, I just jump in real quick. That's a great point. The way that you just said that is, sort of letting the system also know, what is this device that we're controlling, and where does it reside in the chain of command? Kind of, what does this associate with, right? Do we know if this is a source device or a far end device? And then by the system knowing that information about that device, you can sort of make assumptions in the way it's going to be used. So when you run reports, again, it's all sort of filtering back to what types of devices they are. So yeah, sort of having a super driver is really the heart of this whole idea of being able to, have true analytics.
And it's going to vary too on a manufacturer by manufacturer basis, but I would imagine that we can come up with some type of a template that says for this particular device type, these are the characteristics that we'd like to be able to get from it.
Interesting. So is that something that where you're going back to the actual manufacturer of the devices? And again, we're real quickly, we're not talking about the control system manufacturers. We're talking about the device manufacturers of the stuff we're controlling and pulling information from. So Steve, is that where you go back to the actual people who are making the displays, who are making the video switchers, who are making the projectors and saying, hey, this is the stuff that we need back?
I think it's definitely a service that can be provided and something that we're considering, and it's a way to, similar to just approaching them about module development to begin with, a way that they can add value to their product so that they're not only making it easier for programmers to work with it and making it compatible with platforms, but they're also being able to make it leverage have leverage its capabilities in a monitoring application.
Yeah, and Tim, Brian said he didn't want to talk about drivers, but frankly speaking, this is how you enable an embedded data analytics engine inside of a control solution. It's all about the drivers and understanding what the device, that kind of this model that was just discussed about knowing where a device is in the food chain and what its purpose is kind of the fundamentals on which we built the current solution that we're offering. So was that right, Brian?
Yeah, that's totally right. I mean, I didn't want to reveal my cards too early, so I guess we're talking about drivers. But no, you're absolutely right. That's you hit the nail on the head.
All right, let's kind of continue this driver conversation and then the data conversation. One thing that folks, programmers understand this, and I'm not just talking about programmers for control and automation systems. Folks who have computer science degrees and have done this for a long time understand that an aware system and an intelligent system is not something that just happens organically overnight. You don't put a computer chip in the middle of a petri dish and the next morning you have a program, right? Folks do this, and you have to have an end goal in mind. Clint, one of the things that you guys do is you would do a distributed system, and I want to I'll ask you guys that specifically, but also for Stephen and Brian. What from you guys is an aware system, is an intelligent system, and what is the benefit of getting there for you?
Sure. Typically, in a traditional system, there's kind of a master CPU. We like to call them brains because it's fun, but other manufacturers call them CPUs. So there's a master brain, and then there's a number of slaves, and the relationship between the two is generally programmed. With our solution, the brains are inherently aware of each other. So if you have a brain in the basement that's controlling, go ahead, you want to ask?
Real quickly, yeah. You said inherently, so just out of the box, they're aware of each other. Okay.
Correct. So if I got a unit a brain in the basement that controls the building's Lutron lighting system, and I'm on the third floor of that building putting in a classroom, and I'm going to control the projector in that room and the screen and so forth. The minute I plug the brain in that classroom into the IP network, it finds the unit in the basement by itself. It communicates with it. It understands its position in the system, and it now knows how to do the lighting through that brain in the basement without you having to program anything. So now, what's the benefits? A couple benefits. A, that sounds great. B, there's no single point of failure. So, if for some reason a brain did stop working, you just go get another brain, plug it in, boom, done. Okay. And also the scalability of the system comes into play. Let's just assume a brain will average about $1,000, and you have a brain per space. So now you want to do a huddle table. And you want to have control, and you put in a brain for $1,000 list price, and you have control in that huddle space. But eventually you want to take that and build it out, not only from that huddle space, but to that entire floor, to that entire building, to that entire campus. You just keep adding brains, and you can scale this thing from a huddle space to a campus effortlessly.
All right, Steve, from your standpoint, when we're talking about whether it's a distributed system or a single point system, how do we get to an intelligent system, right? How do we get to a system that like Clint said, is aware of the other systems and can pull all this data and can serve it up. Not seamlessly is the wrong word here, but from the end user standpoint, pretty intuitively.
Well, I mean, part of it is that has to be part of the architecture of the system, and and of course, programming comes into play there. But it's something that I think is special to the way that that Kramer is approaching their products and their solutions, and it can be done in other solutions through different programming methods. It seems that some of those are easier to do than others, I guess, is the best solution for it, if I'm answering the question right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate it. All right, guys, as we kind of wrap up here, I want to get into a little bit of cloud and ask Kramer kind of what makes it a little bit different. Brian, from your guys' standpoint, I am aware of probably a half dozen cloud-based control systems and solutions. So let's start with the first obvious question is what makes Kramer's cloud system different, and then talk a little bit about why you think the cloud programming and cloud control is preferable to other versions of control.
Sure. So, first, we are built and born in the cloud. So, we're truly cloud-based, where the programming environment, the organization of your projects, your data management, and everything is all 100% in the cloud. Your control of your spaces is on-premise. So we have a physical brain that lives in each, and that's what sort of makes it a little bit different than others, where some other cloud-based systems are no brain at all. So you're running just an app, and it's an app-based control system. And we've been there. We did that for a few years, and it was successful, but it has its own limitations in that we can't really reach into the space to manage any kind of information. We can't expect, let's say, an iPad to be there and on and always ready to go with the app open at any given time, things like that. And that sort of pushes us away from automation. So we have to have some kind of a physical device there. Then there's others that are a little more extreme, that they're server-based. So you have to have your system live on a server on the network. The problem there is that limits small room deployments, because now you have to have a physical server on-prem that can go and do all your control across your network. And that gets pretty expensive pretty quickly. So we sort of met in the middle and did a hybrid of having sort of your traditional with a brain in the space and doing all your programming online, having your management online. Basically anything that you're going to log into for your system is going to be in the cloud. And the true benefit of being cloud-based, kind of no matter who you are, is the fact that you don't have to download and manage your own software on your computer. We live in a cloud-based world where I could take my laptop, throw it out my car window, go to Best Buy, get a new one out of the box, log into Dropbox, log into Google Drive, log into all these things, and have everything that I had. Kramer controls the same way. I log into my manager, I can see every project I've ever done, I can log into the builder and make changes, and it pushes over the web into the brain on-prem. So
real quick question about
kind of sums, yeah.
Real quick question about that, because there are certain installations, and Steve and I have both done them, where being connected to the internet proper is not an option. And my buddy Harry Mead, who works in Breeze inside the Beltway, deals with these sorts of projects every single day, and I'll let you extrapolate what systems he works on. What is your guys' answer or solution for those that cannot be on the network, on the internet proper?
So there's two things. I mean, one is, get your brain programmed, configured, ready to go. Use your Verizon hotspot or tether your phone. You don't need a crazy internet connection. We're not transferring a lot of data or anything like that. And it doesn't have to be on the building network for configuring and programming and all that. Just about anybody can tether at this point. Even if you just run out to your truck, tether real quick to your phone, push that configuration in your brain in the rare cases that you don't have an internet connection at all. And then the other extreme circumstance is we have the ability to bring the cloud on-prem. So if somebody wants to do a large deployment and put the cloud onto their network and have their own private cloud, we can do that as well. We built the architecture. with that in mind to be able to, bring everything on premise if we need to.
Okay, no, that's a good solution. All right, guys, let's wrap up here talking about training and one of the things that Steve and I have both gone through several classes. Steve used to teach classes, for crying out loud, way before my time. Just going to put that out there. Way.
Hey, we're not that much difference in age.
Clint, how do we get trained on this stuff?
So for our product, if you go onto the website, there's a button that you can press on the Kramer Control page, and that will get you to be able to register in our online academy. It takes somewhere for the average user between 2 and 3 hours to go through the online material. Once you're through with the online material, you'll certainly know how to design and sell a Kramer Control solution. If you decide to then put together a project that actually utilizes Kramer Control, we'll take a look at that project, make sure you've gotten everything right, and if so, we'll make you're immediately a certified Kramer Control programmer. So it takes about 3 to 4 hours, and everything that we do is mostly drag and drop. We do have a library of about 5,000 drivers already. We will write a driver. You can submit to us to write a driver, and we also don't make anything a secret. Steve, runs an organization and that does independent programming. We'll give him all the stuff that's necessary, and if his company wanted to write drivers, they could write drivers. Nothing's a secret, so it's easy to learn. You can learn it in a couple hours, and it's drag and drop, and so you go. That's pretty much as simple as it gets.
All right, but you do have the certified part, which was actually going to maybe be my next question. So you can become certified. Steve and we've had a number of other control programming things have come up over the last 5 years or so. Does it make sense for you guys, whether it's an independent programming house or maybe put on an integrator hat, to diversify, to expand your horizons and saying, you know what, here's another opportunity for us to service a different set of clientele, to go out and whether it's, become Kramer certified or become, another platform to learn, so you guys can learn the various options that are out there for control?
So from our perspective, yes, it does, and for a couple of reasons, and we can approach it from different directions. Is part of our business is doing the module and driver development, and that's something that we've been able to create a following and establish a presence in doing, and we specialize more in the complex devices, and that's something that it provides value to manufacturers on both sides as well as the client, which is always a good thing when everybody likes you. And the second part is that there are more rooms that are getting control and technology these days, and not every room is necessarily, and not every client is not suited for one particular solution. And there are a number of different players, and it's good for us to be able to leverage our knowledge and our capability in all of these different manners, because when it comes down to it, it's not necessarily about how it's programmed or how it's configured, but it's knowing what to do and knowing how to provide the right solution for the client. So that knowledge is pretty much universal, and being able to apply it in these different areas is always a big value, because you're just increasing your offerings, and as well as you're opening the doors to new client relationships.
All right, very good. That will be the last word here, gentlemen. I thank you so much, Mr. Clint Hoffman from Kramer. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
How do people get a hold of you?
So at Kramer, we use first initial, last name. So if you want me, I'm at C. Hoffman at kramerus.com, Kramer with a K, of course. And Brian would be at B. Morris at kramerus.com. And our website is www.kramerav.com.
All right, very good. Mr. Greenblatt, sir, I appreciate it as always.
Sure. Glad to be here. First, I'll put in a plug for State of Control. Check it out if you like these conversations. We do a monthly show, and love to talk more about these topics. It's an AVNation podcast. And if you want to reach me, my website is controlconcepts.net, and I'm on social media and other areas as Steve Greenblatt. So it's quite easy.
All right, very good. My name is Tim Albright. At this point, don't follow me. I'm most likely kvetching about the Bears, the Chicago Bears season. But go by the website if you would, please, avnation.tv, avnation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others. Steve's program, State of Control, is one of those. We also have one that deals with live staging and events, and we have 2 weeklies, one that looks at the home and residential part of AV, and one that looks at the commercial. Each one happens weekly. So check all that out. And also, while you're there, check out our underwriters. These are the folks that support us and help us do what we do, and Kramer is one of those, and we appreciate them for their support. So all that and more at avnation.tv, avnation.tv. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. This has been an AVNation special.